DHS storms a data center. Millions of Americans secretly tracked. Inside a private data center, federal agents discovered servers quietly collecting location data, calls, and online activity of millions of unsuspecting Americans. What they found exposed a secret surveillance operation hiding in plain sight. At 2:13 a.m., the servers were still running. Rows of machines hummed inside a privately owned data center on the outskirts of a major American city, processing location data, call metadata, browsing behavior, and movement patterns in real time. No one inside believed they were doing anything illegal. They were wrong. Within minutes, Department of Homeland Security agents would breach the facility, cut encrypted uplinks, and seize hardware that had quietly logged the daily lives of millions of Americans, without warrants, without consent, and without public knowledge. This was not a foreign intelligence operation. This surveillance was domestic, and it was hidden in plain sight, the invisible infrastructure. Modern surveillance does not begin with cameras mounted on street corners or agents watching from unmarked vehicles. It begins quietly, invisibly, embedded in the systems people rely on every day. It begins with infrastructure. Every phone ping that updates a location, every credit card swipe recorded by a payment processor, every application permission accepted without being read. Together, these fragments form a detailed map of daily life. Most Americans believe this information is fragmented, scattered across corporations, anonymized, protected by policy, and restricted by law. They assume no single entity can see the full picture. That belief depends on trust. Trust that private companies respect legal boundaries. Trust that government agencies adhere to constitutional limits. Trust that oversight mechanisms function as intended. But trust is not a safeguard. This case would demonstrate how easily that trust could be bypassed, not through force or secrecy, but through contracts, technicalities, and delegation. Because the system that quietly tracked the movements, associations, and habits of millions of Americans was not housed in a federal building. It was not operated by uniformed agents or bound by traditional oversight. It was outsourced. A contract no one asked questions about. The trail did not begin with suspicion. It began with paperwork. During a routine Department of Homeland Security procurement audit, a mid-level compliance analyst noticed a discrepancy that seemed minor at first glance. One contractor's billing volume had nearly tripled over 18 months. There had been no public expansion of mission scope, no congressional authorization, no announced national emergency. Yet the payments continued. The company described itself as a data analytics and threat mapping solutions provider. The language was deliberately broad, technically accurate, but operationally opaque. Oversight was minimal. Layered subcontracting agreements obscured responsibility and diluted accountability. Funds passed through multiple corporate entities before reaching operational teams, making it nearly impossible for any single reviewer to see the full picture. Tens of millions of dollars flowed quietly, shielded from detailed scrutiny. At first, the anomaly was attributed to bureaucratic inefficiency, a familiar feature of large federal systems. Then someone asked a question that should have been routine. What data justified this cost? There was no clear answer. The whistleblower. The case did not unravel through software analysis or automated alerts. It unraveled through fear. A systems engineer employed by one of the subcontractors reached out through protected channels, using protocols designed for national security disclosures. The engineer held active clearance. They had signed strict non-disclosure agreements. They understood the legal and professional consequences of speaking out, but they also understood the system they were maintaining. According to the whistleblower, the data center was not simply analyzing threat indicators or modeling hypothetical risks. It was ingesting raw, unfiltered data streams at massive scale. Cell phone location histories were collected continuously. Social media metadata was scraped and indexed. Financial transaction timestamps revealed movement patterns. Vehicle location data was pulled from private toll systems and license plate databases. None of it was anonymized. Every data point was linked, indexed, and preserved. The system allowed analysts to reconstruct past movements, associations, and routines with alarming precision. And there were no warrants, the legal gray zone. The operation survived not by breaking the law outright, but by exploiting its margins. Private companies are not bound by the Fourth Amendment in the same manner as government agencies. They are permitted to collect data, aggregate it, and analyze it for commercial purposes. The problem arises when that data is quietly routed back to the government. In this case, DHS did not officially collect the information. They accessed it. The distinction was deliberate and carefully documented. Legal memoranda framed the arrangement as third-party data utilization rather than direct surveillance. On paper, the government remained at arm's length. In practice, it had full visibility. This legal gray zone allowed mass surveillance to operate beneath the threshold of constitutional challenge, shielded by technical definitions rather than democratic consent, until scrutiny arrived. Following the data flows, investigators shifted their focus from contracts to networks. Cyber forensic teams traced outbound traffic from the data center. Encrypted channels connected continuously to multiple government endpoints, some classified, others unremarkable on the surface. Data moved without interruption. There were no apparent filters limiting scope, no targeting parameters, no minimization protocols to discard irrelevant information. The system did not distinguish between suspects and civilians. It did not ask who someone was. It tracked where they went, who they met, how often they returned, and how their patterns changed over time. This was not reactive intelligence gathering. It was persistent mapping. Millions of Americans had become data points without their knowledge, their consent, or any judicial oversight. Political entanglements. As financial records were examined more closely, the story deepened. The parent contractor had made substantial political donations across multiple election cycles. Senior executives held advisory roles in policy groups. Former government officials moved effortlessly between public office and private sector leadership. This was not coincidence. It was an ecosystem. The surveillance program did not operate in isolation. It operated within a network of influence that insulated it from scrutiny and discouraged inquiry. Oversight committees received briefings that emphasized national security necessity while omitting operational detail. Audit requests were delayed or redirected. Internal warnings were softened before reaching decision-makers. No one wanted to ask the question that would force accountability, because asking it would expose how deeply the system had already embedded itself. When DHS realized it had lost control, the moment of reckoning came during an internal DHS review. Analysts discovered that the contractor retained copies of datasets that were supposed to be ephemeral. Data was being archived indefinitely. In some cases, profiles extended back years. This was no longer intelligence support. It was a shadow archive of civilian life. DHS leadership faced a choice: shut it down quietly or intervene decisively. They chose the latter, authorizing the raid. Raiding a data center tied to government contracts is not routine. The legal approvals were extensive. Federal warrants, interagency coordination across multiple departments, cyber forensics teams on standby, operational protocols rehearsed repeatedly. The operation was classified, not to protect secrets, but to prevent interference or inadvertent destruction of critical evidence. If word leaked, servers could be wiped remotely within seconds. Time and precision mattered. The night of the operation, the raid occurred before dawn. Agents secured network access points first, isolating the facility from external control. Power was stabilized, not cut. Data integrity mattered more than disruption. Engineers were detained, but not arrested. No one resisted. Most were stunned. They had believed the operation was legal. Some whispered disbelief, realizing the scale of what had been under their hands for years, what the servers held. Inside the data center, investigators found what the whistleblower had described: petabytes of data, indexed by individual identifiers, search tools that allowed queries by name, phone number, location radius, or association network, historical movement timelines, contact frequency maps, predictive models estimating future behavior. This was not counterterrorism. This was population-level surveillance, the absence of warrants. The most damaging discovery was procedural. There were no individualized warrants, no court orders, no FISA authorizations tied to the majority of records. Instead, legal memos justified access under third-party data acquisition. The justification collapsed under scrutiny, because aggregation changes the nature of surveillance. At scale, it becomes intrusion. Who was targeted? There was no single target group. Activists appeared in the data, journalists, immigration lawyers, political donors, ordinary citizens with no criminal history. The system did not discriminate. It recorded everything. That was the point. Internal damage control. Within days, statements were drafted, carefully worded, technically accurate, strategically incomplete. DHS acknowledged data management concerns. The contractor claimed miscommunication. No one said the word illegal, but systems were shut down, access keys revoked, servers seized. The silence that followed was intentional. The cases that never happened. Prosecutors faced a dilemma. Charging the contractors risked exposing classified methodologies. Charging government officials risked constitutional crisis. So the response was muted. Administrative leave, contract termination, policy reviews, no dramatic arrests, no televised accountability. The system corrected itself quietly. What this raid really meant. This was not about one data center. It was about a method. Outsourcing surveillance, privatizing accountability, avoiding constitutional limits through technicalities. The raid exposed how easily citizens' rights can be bypassed when oversight lags dangerously behind rapidly evolving technology. It revealed a system where secrecy and efficiency outweighed transparency, and where personal freedoms were quietly traded for convenience and control. The public never knew the full story. Most Americans never learned the scale of what had been taken. They were told safeguards existed. They were told reforms were underway. They were not told their lives had already been indexed and quietly archived, leaving an invisible record of every action, decision, and connection stored without their knowledge, without consent, and without accountability. Final reflection. Surveillance no longer needs uniforms. It does not announce itself. It operates through contracts, code, and plausible deniability. The question is not whether technology can track us. It already does. The question is whether anyone is still watching the people who run the system. If this story unsettled you, it should, because the most powerful systems in modern society operate without noise and without scrutiny. If you believe transparency matters, if you believe privacy is not obsolete, if you believe accountability should extend beyond press releases, subscribe, share this story, stay informed, because the next data center is already online, and this time, no one may knock at the door.